Hi, friends. I wanted to quickly address something that, the mainstream media has been putting out there shamelessly about Julian Assange. And it's really about his personal hygiene and all that sort of thing, and that his time in the Ecuadorian embassy was some kind of sort of like a frat party of some kind, like where he was just sort of doing all sorts of crazy things, including the claim by the mainstream corporate-owned media that he was smearing feces on the wall. This is just such a sad indictment of the corporate media, that this is the sort of nonsense that they put out. They don't even recognize the terrible predicament they're actually all in, the press, the so-called press, these stenographers that call themselves journalists. They don't realize this precedent that is being set if Assange is extradited to the US to face basically 45 years of solitary confinement and torture and possibly execution. They don't realize the mainstream corporate-owned press and the Murdoch press here in Australia, who are ignoring it at best or smearing him, Julian Assange, is that they can also be extradited. If they say anything inconvenient to US empire, if they say anything inconvenient about war crimes, anything about war crimes, basically anything that the US has, the US empire, and I call it an empire because it has 1,000 bases worldwide that we know of, anything that's inconvenient to empire, exposing war crimes and corruption, they too, any of these so-called journalists, and I use that word lightly, can be extradited to the US to face the same kind of thing that Julian Assange is facing. And they're so silly, they think that they're exempt from this because somehow they think because they're protected if they're just promoting a government narrative, if they're just promoting what the government wants them to. The government, at some point, depending on how much they travel into authoritarianism, into that area, and the governments become authoritarian, they can decide whatever they want is inconvenient. Any sort of criticism whatsoever won't be confined to one country, like the US. Other countries will start adopting this as well. It will become a trend. Because all governments lie, so they don't want to be held accountable. The Fourth Estate was supposed to hold governments accountable, but they do not. And Julian Assange is one of the last, and WikiLeaks are one of the last bastions of free press. There are independent journalists in the world who are doing great work. They're not stenographers for empire. They're not stenographers that ignore corruption and government crimes, etc. But there are a very small few in the world, really, compared to the powerful corporate media that puts out propaganda. So, these silly so-called journalists and, these talking heads on these various corporate news sites don't realize that they are also in the crosshairs eventually, because it never stops at one person. Once you get away with extraditing a journalist who has been helping whistleblowers deliver much-needed information to the public about what's going on, once you do something like that and you actually use criminal law to suppress information, that's the heading towards dictatorship. This is the sort of thing that's happening right now in real time. So I wanted to just briefly talk about Fidel Neves, who was a former diplomat at the embassy. He actually lived in the Ecuadorian embassy in London while Julian Assange was, there. And he says, Julian Assange was put through hell at the embassy. He says that Julian Assange was 100% respectful. I put that in quotes, 100% respectful, but claims he suffered from a government plot to force him out. Julian Assange was always respectful but went through hell in the Ecuadorian embassy as officials tried to, quote, break him down, end quote, according to a former senior diplomat. Fidel Neves, and I'm sorry if I'm massacring that name, worked at the London embassy for 6 of the 7 years the WikiLeaks figurehead lived there, and says they became friends. he was speaking to Sky News, and that's interesting. I'm surprised that Sky News had him on, because they've been all part of this weird sort of trying to basically dehumanize Assange for a very long time, or ignoring him. They've pretty much been ignoring him, the mainstream media, intentionally, until this time when it's possibly they can get more, clicks, more views. That's really what it's about. The mainstream media isn't about, informing the public. It's really about how many clicks they can get, and at the present, and how much attention they can get over drama. And this is sort of like they consider this is sort of they consider it only newsworthy because that people are focusing on it because he's been expelled from the embassy, and that he might be possibly extradited. So that's all sort of drama that they love, and they think that they'll get more advertising money. And, this is why they're focusing on it. It's simply about, capitalism, really, making profit. Anyway, this is a good, I tip my hat to them for this thing, where Sky News has been interviewing Fidel Neves. And it says, speaking to Sky News, Fidel Neves disputed claims that Assange had assaulted guards, didn't clean up after himself, didn't take care of his pet cat, and even smeared human excrement on the walls of the embassy, end quote. He said Julian had a respectful relationship with staff, diplomats, and administrative staff. I don't recall a single incident where he disrespected someone until I left in July 2018. Quote, he said, I was there the first months of the last year, and I witnessed when Julian was told that he would no longer be allowed to have internet or phone or access to the phone and wouldn't be able to have visitors. The strategy was very clear: break him down. The government didn't know how to end the asylum and face the catastrophic historical shame for doing that, end quote. Well, they were able to, the Ecuadorian embassy, Elena Merino, rather, was able to face the catastrophic historical shame because he received, not only did his personal bank account swell tremendously, but he also, the US approved a loan from the IMF, via the IMF, to him in Ecuador for $4.2 billion. I think there was some extra money too. I don't know. There was a lot of money. It was more than 4.2, I think. But anyway, that was the ransom point for Elena Merino to hand over Julian Assange and face the historical shame for doing that. Was this 4.2 million, and also that his bank accounts are magnificently increased now, his personal wealth. So that's what, that's the sort of leader, in quotes, that Elena Merino is, and I hope that he, that he is haunted by what might happen, or what has previously happened, how he's made that Julian Assange, who is simply a journalist publisher whose only crime, in quotes, is journalism and helping expose corruption and war crimes, which is what all journalists are supposed to do, what the free press is supposed to do, and he's being made to pay for that. He's being made to pay, in particular, for things like the WikiLeaks collateral murder video, and also that was released to WikiLeaks by whistleblower Chelsea Manning. And, and the other thing, and one of the other things, there was many things that were released by WikiLeaks exposing corruption, particularly about the US. There was even Russia they leaked stuff about Russia too. But the Podesta emails, which I think helped bring down Hillary Clinton because people saw how corrupt she was. This is the sort of thing that WikiLeaks does. It exposes corruption, exposes war crimes, because the mainstream media doesn't talk about any of this, really. The mainstream media doesn't talk about war crimes or even anything about war. The only way to find out about war, what's really going on, is a few independent journalists. So anyway, it's very, very sad. And also I wanted to just show you a tweet by someone who basically was indicating that, since Lenin Moreno and the Ecuadorian embassy have been filming everything that Julian Assange has been doing, as far as I can tell from the time he entered the embassy 7 years ago, they've been filming every single thing, including his medical exams with his doctor, which is just outrageous. The man had absolutely no privacy. It was like full-on Big Brother in there for all that time. And if there was any truth in this whole excrement smearing nonsense, they could easily provide that video. Easily. So this is all, and they could easily provide any evidence of, something like any of the claims that they've made. Any. But they don't. And why? Because it's not true. It's complete lies, and it's meant to dehumanize Julian Assange, so that it makes it easier for everybody to lose interest in him and think, what an awful person. Oh, he deserves to. I mean, you don't break asylum for somebody. You don't revoke asylum for a political asylum situation because somebody isn't nice and you don't like them. And this whole thing about people not supporting Julian Assange because they don't like him. Please, grow up. This is not about whether you like him or do not like him. And remember, a lot of stuff put out about him is actually propaganda to dehumanize him. I don't know Julian Assange. I know that he is incredibly brave, though. I don't agree with everything that he has said or his connections on Twitter with some alt-righters. I don't agree with that. But I know that he is a hero, that he is incredibly courageous. I couldn't last a month of the sort of solitary confinement type thing with no exercise, no getting out, and particularly in the last year with no contact, no internet, no phone, hardly any people able to visit him, and when they do, they're listened upon, and everything is, he's surveilled constantly. And having the health problems that he has, and being away from one's family, all of those things, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The psychological and physical torture that whole existence in that Ecuadorian embassy, all that time. And no support from my awful government here, either, the Labour government when it was in office, or this coalition, this awful right-wing coalition government, and any of the federal politicians, most of them, 99.9% of them have said nothing about him this last 7 years. It's a disgrace. But if I was in that situation, I don't think I would last a month, maybe not even 2 weeks. He was there for 7 years. The fact that people can't even appreciate that. What is wrong with people? They can't even appreciate what he has gone through. And every time WikiLeaks released something about some corruption or something about the US empire, it was another nail in that man's coffin. And he knew it. This, is a savage, rogue empire, the US empire. They do the opposite to what they claim they are. But most people don't realize that. And why? Because we don't have a press we don't have a fourth estate anymore that will actually say what's going on. They're just stenographers. So, every time WikiLeaks released something about, some US politician like Hillary Clinton, or about war or the war crimes or whatever, anything that exposed and embarrassed the government and the empire, was one more nail in his coffin, and he knew it. But he did it anyway. That to me is a hero, is somebody who is basically pretty much sacrificed their life for information being able to get out to the public, and because of all the war crimes and war is a crime, but the collateral murder thing is happening every day in Iraq. If you listen to Iraq veterans that are telling the truth about what goes on there, it's a daily thing. It's a Christchurch massacre every day. That's what it is. It's a collateral murder video every day. That's not an aberration, what happened in collateral murder. That video released by Chelsea Manning, who now is in prison too. It's a savage empire. That's not an aberration, what you see in that collateral murder video. So anyway, anybody who's sort of, I don't like him, just grow up, for God's goodness sake. Get a grip. You don't realize what's going on. If that's your excuse for not saying anything, I don't like him. seriously, what kind of babies, how infantilized have we become? I mean, this is like in real time where it's tipping over into fascism, it's tipping towards fascism. This is what fascist governments do. They get rid of anybody who speaks out against the government, anybody who is exposing crimes and war crimes and corruption. That's what fascist governments do. That's what Hitler did when the poisonous kitchen, getting rid of journalists. You don't even have to execute people to get rid of them. You don't even have to go that far. You just have to have a very obedient press that will say whatever you want them to say, get the talking points, like the CIA virtually has been embedded for a long time. This is a proven thing. Look up Operation Mockingbird. And they've even admitted in 1981, the director of the CIA at the time said, "We'll know when we've been successful, when everything that the public hears and sees is basically false. When they believe when everything that is put out there is basically propaganda." I'll put up a little meme and what he said. This is where we're at, and these governments that are allowed to do that and get away with that, this extradition of Julian Assange. The U.S. is a rogue state that is actually the greatest threat to world peace today. And I'm going to show you a little excerpt from something that I saw the other day. Jimmy Carter was talking about how, the U.S. is now just, is basically the... Oh, hold on a second, I'll find what he said. I can't find the actual piece, what Jimmy Carter said, but he was basically saying that the U.S. is like it's a major threat. It's the greatest sort of warmongering country in the history of the world, basically, something to that effect. But I wanted to read just a little bit from this article, the same article that he was talking about this. Jimmy Carter is, one of the U.S. presidents, and he's not a clean slate either when it comes to, he was involved in various things as well, problematic behavior. All these U.S. presidents have been involved in problematic behavior. Anyway, in this article it said, while there is this prevalent belief in the United States that the country almost always wages war for noble purposes and in defense of freedom, global public opinion and facts paint a very different picture. Most countries surveyed in 2013 WIN/Gallup poll identified the United States as the greatest threat to world peace, and a 2017 Pew Research poll found that a record number of people in 30 surveyed nations viewed the U.S. power and influence as a, quote, major threat, end quote. The U.S. has also invaded or bombed dozens of countries and supported nearly every single right-wing dictatorship in the world since the end of World War II. It has overthrown or attempted to overthrow dozens of foreign governments since 1949 and has actively sought to crush nearly every single people's liberation movement over the same period. And it has also meddled in scores of elections in countries that are allies and adversaries alike. That was from a Telesur English article. That's really all I wanted to say, that, it would be easily proven, really, if Julian Assange was smearing excrement all over the walls of the Ecuadorian embassy or doing any of the other things that he's been accused of. It would be easy to prove that. And the reason there isn't any proof out there in the mainstream media, any videos, is because it isn't true. So this is just a effort by, again, the mainstream media stupidly cutting their own throats, basically, by dehumanizing a journalist, publisher, so that it can be much easier, with public opinion, it can be much easier. They won't push back on his extradition to the U.S. for absolute torture and solitary confinement, and for 45 years, and possibly even execution, because that's the kind of administration they have right there now with John Bolton and people like that. They're bloodthirsty psychopaths. So, we have to never forget Julian Assange and be putting constant pressure on these on these governments that just are, they all don't want their lies exposed. So no government really is interested in having him free, and they want to make an example of him so that nobody else ever does that again. That's what this is. Making an example of him so everybody is frightened out of their wits, to whistleblow, like see what happens to Chelsea Manning, to be a publisher and release whistleblower information, see what happens to Julian Assange, see what'll happen to you if you do this. This is the end of the free press if he is allowed to be extradited. And whoever argues about that is some kind of troll for imperialism. Is a troll, is either ignorant or is trolling to continue the narrative that he does not deserve, that he's not a journalist, which is what even stupid stenographers calling themselves journalists say, or that he is, whatever, that he doesn't deserve protection, that he's released secrets, as in that have put people's lives in danger. That has not been proven either. This is all false, and it's all disgusting. It disgusts me. And my government, the Australian government, disgusts me the most. They are disgusting, and I am ashamed. They do not represent me, as I've said before. So anyway, and most governments do not, pretty much all governments don't represent the people anymore. They're just doing their own thing, and we're just cogs in the wheel of capitalism for them to line their pockets. And these wars, people who go to these wars and kill other people that are poor people too, are just thrown away at the end. They're discarded. Poor people going over to kill other poor people in other countries, and it's all to line the pockets of oligarchs. That's what this is all about. But people can only support this sort of thing and allow it to continue. I'm talking about war now. If they have some kind of seed of racism there somewhere, because if everybody stood up and said it is wrong what we are doing to brown people overseas for resources and hegemony, these war crimes every single day, if everybody stood up and said this is wrong, and said I'm not going to vote for you if you continue to vote for these politicians, I'm not going to vote for you if you continue on signing bills and promoting imperialist wars. If everybody said that in the U.S., these people they care more about their careers than anything. They would probably have to rethink what they're doing. So really, even though yes, capitalism is a big problem and the poverty draft is a big problem and so forth, and people need to understand the operational reality of a sovereign economy via an understanding of MMT, so that they can understand how to change things and push politicians to change things in an economic sense. But really, that is not going to solve the problem of war, of the ongoing perpetual war. Because if people do not think that do not have the same sort of empathy for brown people overseas that are being murdered, 1 million plus in Iraq now, then they're not going to be saying, I'm not going to vote for you, such and such, I'm not going to vote for you until you stop these wars. It's not going to be a priority. If we don't see ourselves in these people, in these countries, these brown people in these countries, and Muslim majority countries too, if we don't see that they are just like us, and we don't have the same sort of sorry, it's a bit sunny here. We don't have the same kind of care about them as we do for our own families and friends, etc. And we should. Then we're going to, doesn't matter, even if everybody understands how the operational reality of the economy works, and we start pushing politicians to do the right thing and to stop lying to us that they can't afford free healthcare and so forth. If we don't have this sort of disregard for these people in these other countries that we are killing, and we're not saying anything, then it won't matter even if we understand, even if there was no, even if the poverty draft didn't exist, people will still join the military because they will have these patriotic ideas and American exceptionalism ideas that have been indoctrinated into them. And, if you don't, and they'll probably continue in one way or another. They'll start, there's a whole lot of ways that you can, they'll find ways to get people to join, and they're already doing that now. Join the military. So if we're complicit in these murderous things going on, if we're not saying anything. So it's not enough, to sort of think that the understanding of things, the economy, and being able to push these people to do the right thing by us is going to end these wars. It will help for sure to end a poverty draft. It will definitely help, but it's if we don't care about other people overseas, brown people, just because they're not like us in quotes, then there'll be ways that these things will continue. And I could see that they'd probably do some sort of conscription again. That might help bring an end to the war. When people see that their sons and daughters are being murdered and maimed, and they're being conscripted, that might actually end some wars. That's the problem. There is no conscription. So people don't have this they're divorced from all of it. That's what helped end the Vietnam War. And they knew that. And that's why now they found a different way of forcing people to join through inequality and poverty. Anyway, I'm rambling on now, but this is all connected, and so I hope that you will speak out for Julian Assange if you haven't already. And there's been a petition. I don't know if it'll be successful. I just feel like my government is just such a US lackey that it won't do anything. But there's a petition with about 120,000 signatures on it that was set off by Philip Adams, a radio announcer here in Australia, and it was put to the Parliament just recently, I think, the Australian Parliament, and I don't know though if it will actually be taken seriously or they'll do anything. This is the terrible thing. It doesn't matter how many people call out for something. If the US wants the Australian government to do its bidding, it's like, how high, How high can I jump for you? Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you like the content on Faint Signals from Vega. It's at Vegan Trove on YouTube. Please hit the like button if you're at the YouTube channel, and please leave comments. I always enjoy comments. So thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time. Bye for now.